Hey, Central Texas, First Alert Meteorologist C.D. Finley here, coming at you with another episode of Weather Nerds, or I should say First Alert Weather Nerd C.D. Finley here, coming at you. I apologize if you heard that just a second ago. I had the stream pulled up on my phone, and it overplayed the microphone most likely there right before I unmuted it. So hopefully that wasn't too loud for all of you watching live on our Facebook page. But again, yeah, this is episode number 14 of Weather Nerds this week, and we have quite a lot to talk about. First and foremost, starting with probably the biggest headline in the weather world today, the passing of a wonderful, amazing meteorologist who was a pioneer in the industry for the last many, many decades. And for those of you who keep up with your local TV stations, you all know how much local meteorologists are really loved by their local communities, and many names that may pop up, especially here immediately in Central Texas, are names like Rusty Garrett, of course, our own chief meteorologist Brady Taylor. This is a name that many people may know because of not just because of his local fame as a weatherman up in Oklahoma, but as nationally as well. He led the weather industry in terms of advancements in technology. I mean, the reason that we have radar and we cover the storms the way we do across the board, across our nation today, is because of this man. And that man, of course, is the one and only Gary England of Oklahoma City. He unfortunately passed away yesterday at the age of 85, leaving behind a wonderful, amazing legacy in the world of meteorology. For those of you who don't know, he was the former chief meteorologist at KWTV in Oklahoma City. That would be News 9. And again, he's known for a lot of different things. First and foremost, the introduction of Doppler radar back in the early 80s. I think it was about 1981, 1982, that he was the first person ever to use Doppler radar on live television to, warn people in the path of storms. So very unfortunate to hear about his passing. He was very beloved by the weather community. So wanted to shout him out here today and, pay condolences to the respects to the family and stuff like that, because he was very well known in the weather community. If you've ever watched the movie Twisters, you may have seen his cameo in that as well, right there at the beginning of the movie. He was the guy that was on the television right there, kind of warning the main character in that introduction scene with that first tornado. So for those of you who haven't seen that, he was in that movie as well. But yeah, his contribution to weather and research and science in general is just unmatched. And if you go and read all of the stories about Gary England on social media, people telling their stories and their interactions with him, all of them are overwhelmingly positive, and he was just a wonderful human being. So sad to hear of his passing from the last day or two. But that's the top headline in terms of the weather world today. Other headlines in regard to the actual weather itself, it's been quite a busy week here the last week or two across the state of Texas, especially out in the Texas Panhandle, where there were some pretty large tornadoes. In fact, this was a picture of a tornado that occurred out in Morton, Texas, just west of the Lubbock area from this past week. And you can see how large that tornado is. This is what we call a wedge shape. And the reason we call it a wedge tornado is because it's actually wider than it is tall. I believe just based on the measurements that were done, or the estimates that were done by the National Weather Service on their survey, this tornado was estimated to be about 2.2 miles wide out there near the city of Morton. And what's even more impressive is the radar scan that a particular research group was able to procure from this exact tornado. This is a radar scan done by the research group called RAXPOL out of the University of Oklahoma, my old alma mater. In fact, I know a few people who actually work there for RAXPOL. But take a look at this very, very interesting radar scan. It almost looks like a land hurricane. You can see practically the center of the eye of that gigantic tornado, the giant hook echo right there. If you were curious as to what a giant one at that, looks like at radar on close range, that's exactly what that looks like. And, for most of our current technology, I mean, keep in mind, this radar was practically right on top of the storm. They had a giant truck, essentially, with a rotating radar that was able to scan the lower levels of the atmosphere and pick up that tornado, to be exact, pretty much at the surface levels. And with our radars today that we use here at KWTX and pretty much just all across the nation, they don't quite get that close. I mean, if you ever watch our severe thunderstorm coverage here on KWTX or anywhere else for that matter, we use the Fort Worth radar, we use the Granger radar, which is closer down to Austin. And then we also use a combination of the Texas A&M radar that they have on their campus, and we also use our very own Hamilton radar. That kind of consists of the KWTX radar network. And unfortunately, at times, those radar beams are far, far away. So we don't get, those kinds of high-resolution scans because we're not always that close to the storm. Unless the storm is approaching the radar and happens to get close to it, we don't usually see a scan like that. So that's what's interesting about this particular radar scan is they were able to get the truck close enough to where they were able to make it, get the most high resolution possible scan of this storm as it could. And you can see, definitely essentially looks like a radar land hurricane there with that very large tornado that happened out in Morton. And ironically enough, if you were to show this picture to somebody and ask them, what was this tornado ranked in terms of the enhanced Fujita scale? Well, most people would probably guess maybe EF4, EF5 just based on its size. Well, this was actually rated preliminary an EF2, and for the reason of that is that it was mainly over open land. So for those of you who don't know how the enhanced Fujita scale works, it doesn't base a tornado ranking on size or wind speed. It actually bases it on damage. So you could have the most powerful tornado on the planet happen in the middle of nowhere, and if it doesn't hit anything, it could be ranked an EF0 or an EF1. So very interesting part of that science there. I know there's a lot of people who, kind of want that system to be changed because it seems kind of counterintuitive to base it on damage despite how strong the tornado itself might have actually been. So it's just a different measure of things for sure. So that's one of the many highlights that we've seen across the state of Texas today. I know a lot of you, and I'm only going to dive into this quickly because I have some other things that I want to get into as well. But something you may have seen posted on Facebook here on our KWTX Facebook page is that a lot of scientists may actually be considering the fact that Tornado Alley itself may actually be shifting a little bit further to the east. Now, I have a little bit of a caveat to that. Yes, it seems that the overarching peak of tornado season the last few years at least has happened kind of out toward the Midwest and out toward Dixie Alley, which if you don't know what Dixie Alley is, that's essentially an area from Louisiana all across the Gulf states, so into Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, etc. And while it has certainly been the case, it actually kind of depends on what time of year you're talking about. The tornado season shifts as the year goes on. So earlier on, like late March, early April, most storms usually occur in Dixie Alley along those Gulf states. But by the time you get into late April, early May, all the way to mid-May, that's when we're talking about classic Tornado Alley. We're talking from central to North Texas all the way up into the Dakotas, practically right there along the Great Plains. So it kind of depends on where you're at. Yes, overall, the overarching trend seems that Tornado Alley is kind of shifting east, but that doesn't mean tornadoes aren't going to happen in the Great Plains, because they most certainly have, as you saw, especially with that picture out in Morton, Texas from this past week. And so that kind of brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about today, the obvious thing that we have going on this week, and we're going to kind of do this a little bit backwards today. We don't usually get into the forecast until the end of the episode, but again, we have some other things I want to get to, so let's go ahead and jump to it real quick. Obviously, we have a first alert weather day in effect for Central Texas today and tomorrow. And for those of you who are watching on our Degrees of Science YouTube channel, this is for Wednesday, June 11th and Thursday, June 12th. And the big part of that first alert weather day is actually the chance for flash flooding. If you take a look at the rainfall totals for June so far, you'll notice that we are already more than 2/3 of the way to the average rainfall total for the month of June, and we could maybe even exceed that just in the next day or two. As you take a look at the first alert, the Futurecast rainfall, could see anywhere between about 1.5 inches to maybe even upwards of 2 or 3 inches just over the course of the next 24 or 48 hours. So it's certainly looking like a possibility that we could potentially get a lot of rain today. And that's actually the main concern. We're mainly just concerned about the potential for flash flooding. We're not talking about, anything that's going to be overly severe. We're not talking, very large hail. We're not talking about very strong winds. If there were to be a stronger storm, it's certainly a possibility. We could be talking about maybe some occasional hail and gusty winds, but we're not expecting, what we were talking about this past Sunday, which was another thing. We had a lot of severe thunderstorm warnings, some of which had some destructive tags on them, especially out toward the Hubbard area if you were watching our coverage that night. But overall, we're not expecting it to be bad. Just remember the age-old saying, if you see flooding, turn around, don't drown. You definitely want to avoid driving into any flooded streets over the next 2 days, especially because of the excessive rainfall that we are expecting. So that's the reason for the first alert weather day today and tomorrow, not because we're expecting anything super strong, but because the flooding concern is certainly going to be there. And as for the rest of the week, again, you can see those rain chances are going to continue pretty much all the way through Father's Day. We'll slowly warm up into the low 90s, and then eventually the rain chances will hopefully start to go away a little bit by the time we get toward Juneteenth. And the reason I say hopefully is because we don't want to continue with that flash flooding concern. But extra rainfall is definitely not a bad problem to have, especially this time of year. So that's a little bit about what we've got going on in the weather today. And the reason that I wanted to get to that first is actually to introduce you all to our special guest that we have on the podcast today. Everybody say hello and welcome to KWTX photojournalist Jake Ward. Jake, how are you doing today?
Doing good, TD. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So for those of you who don't know, Jake is one of our many two photojournalists, I should say, here that we have at KWTX, of course, the other one being the well-known Brad Vaughn. And Jake, so tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you actually do here with us at KWTX?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And like you said, I'm one of two photojournalists. People are probably a little more familiar with Brad Vaughn because he does that whole Brad the News Guy thing over on his Facebook. But I get to do a little bit of everything as a photojournalist. And, if you watch our newscast, specifically in the evening, you'll probably see a lot of the work that I do. You won't see me, but, I'm somebody that goes out and does a lot of these community events across Central Texas. So think about next time you see a story that happens at a school or something along those lines that's read by our anchors. That was probably put together by me. I also get to do a lot of work with our reporters. I shoot a lot of video for them, help them out. One of the most recent ones last week, Jessica Rajkumar was down in Salado for Governor Abbott. I was down there with her, so I could do stuff like that. I do a lot of breaking news. So anytime if you're watching or you see on Facebook, oh, this is happening, and we have a crew on the scene. Oftentimes I'm the crew on the scene. But one of the things I really enjoy about getting to be a photojournalist is I get to kind of interact with just about everybody in the newsroom, including some different departments, like driving the weather vehicle for our meteorologists, which I'm sure is something we're about to get into here in a second. But I also get to work a decent amount with our sports team, specifically during football season. So that's something I really enjoy doing. I've had the opportunity to travel to March Madness in the past, and shoot some Baylor football games, and even some games for my alma mater, Texas A&M. So that's a little bit of what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like you mentioned, the big reason that we brought you on here today is because Jake is about half the time one of our drivers for the First Alert Weather Explorer and the Weather Edge that we also have. We are our two chase vehicles that we usually use when we're out storm chasing. So and kind of like what Jake said, Jake's kind of the behind the scenes guy. So sometimes you've probably seen some of his work up on KWTX Channel 10. You may have heard his voice as well too. You don't necessarily see his face all that much. So finally putting a name to the face. There you go. Jake, so obviously you've been actually here a little bit at KWTX a little bit longer than I have. Jake, you started what, November
of 2023. So coming up on 2 years here.
Yeah. And then for those of you who don't know, Jake and I, we've known each other since kindergarten probably, so it's been decades at this point that we've known each other. But,
yes. Met CD when I was 5 years old. And he was in my wedding, so we get to have a whole other podcast of just stories there. So,
yep. But yeah, so Jake and I have known each other for a little while. I came along a little bit later, graduated from Oklahoma and moved back here, I should say, in May 2024. So he's had a few more months of experience here at KWTX than I have. So he's had some other chasing experiences that I might not have had, but we've also had some of our fair share of experiences together as well. So I know one of the big highlights of both of our chasing experiences was most certainly the Temple tornado that happened back in May 2024. And for those of you who've been keeping up with us here at Weather Nerds, which, by the way, if you're watching on Facebook, just to kind of quickly explain here, we're not live because of any severe weather. We're actually live today because it's the day of our weekly episode of Weather Nerds. So wanted to put that out there in case any of you in the comments had any worries about that. But going back to what I was saying, so obviously one of the biggest highlights of our chasing careers here with KWTX was certainly that Temple tornado. And again, if you've watched us here on Weather Nerds, you may remember about 2 weeks ago we had an episode talking about the 1-year anniversary, which I'm struggling to remember the exact date of that. It was early May, I think it was. It was like May 20 something. Mm-hmm. Actually, so it would have been late May. But so not too far removed from that 1-year anniversary. And actually, Jake and I were both out chasing that day. So Jake, what do you remember from the Temple tornado?
Oh man, I remember it was a crazy day. I also remember it was your third day on the job.
Yep.
You were very new, and I think this might have been your first time ever chasing. Yeah, here for KWTX, obviously not ever. I know that you did a bunch of chasing during your college career, but it was a crazy day to say the least. And from a meteorology standpoint, you may have been able to anticipate a little bit more, but from my experience, those first couple hours that we were out there, which that's another thing. When you see that we're chasing, in the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock newscast and during some of those cut-ins, it's not just that little bit. It is an all-day affair that we're out there. So I think that day we were probably on the road for 8 or 9 hours, a long time.
I definitely got my fair share of overtime that day.
But I couldn't have anticipated that it was gonna turn into what it did, because we started out down there towards McGregor, I think, if I'm remembering that right.
I think we started out toward the Gatesville area,
yes,
actually.
We started out in Gatesville, and we sat there for quite some time, actually. Oftentimes we do these chases also that, it is a long day, but it may end up, not really turning into anything. But I remember getting the call from Brady, and, we start heading towards that Temple area, and then all of a sudden we're kind of in the midst of it. And, once it kind of dies down, we can kind of get an understanding of really what ended up happening there and the damage that followed. And I spent a good chunk of the day, the following day, down in Temple, talking with people that had lost their homes and their businesses, and that is just kind of like a side note. It's been really cool in the past year to see how that community came together, following that tornado. But yeah, it was a hectic day, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. And I was going to say, so I actually have some photos here for us to kind of share. This is a photo that I took of our Weather Explorer. Yeah, so you can see we were out at Coryell Creek Ranch is where we kind of sat there for a little bit. You also see the Mamadas clouds way up there on the top. Some very turbulent air in the atmosphere that day. But yeah, Jake was actually probably, I don't know if you squint, you might be able to see him, but he was probably sitting in the driver's seat in that when I took that picture. So yeah, that's one of the photos that I took that day. I unfortunately don't have any photos of the actual tornado itself, but we were actually kind of and like you said, it's been really cool to see how Temple is kind of gathered back after all that damage that happened that day. And we actually saw a good little bit of the damage driving through. Mm-hmm. We were kind of, so for those of you who didn't watch the episode 12, I believe it was that we talked about this, but we were kind of caught up in the back part of that storm where we didn't see the tornado necessarily, but there were definitely some like hurricane force winds that we were dealing with. I mean, Jake was driving, I was in the passenger seat. Jake was like slowing down because the wind was so bad.
Death gripping the wheel a little bit.
Yeah. I remember at one point we even had to like pull over into a parking lot because we were like, no, we cannot be on the interstate right now. It is not good. So yeah, it was definitely, though we weren't in the tornadic part of the storm, the straight line winds were very damaging. There was a lot of rain. I mean, it was practically raining sideways. I don't remember if we got any hail or not, but we might have. Because we were kind of coming in on the backside of that storm, once we started, getting cleared up a little bit more, once we finally started moving again, we were able to drive through Temple and see a little bit of the damage. I think we saw some poles that were kind of bent over. And then we got to kind of the outskirts of Temple, and there actually was a house that we came across, I think, that had some pretty significant damage to it. So, yeah. Luckily,
and we talked to the homeowner. I remember that. And luckily everybody was okay. But it's seeing the damage like that can be it can be upsetting to say the least. But you look back at some of these chases, and it is cool to know that you are making some kind of an impact on people when you're out there doing this, knowing that you're helping them stay weather aware. And I'm sure that's something more about. It's more of your day to day than it is mine. But
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, staying weather aware in those kinds of situations is extremely important. I would say the first thing that comes to mind, even this past week, not necessarily related to Temple or anything, but for those of you who didn't see, I believe it was on Sunday, June 8th, we had a lot of storms that rolled through that were anticipated to be really, really strong, and they were up in North Texas and especially West Texas, where there was a station actually that got hit, KXTS in Abilene, Texas. They were doing severe weather coverage just as any other station would. They had to go off air and take coverage when a warning got issued, and lo and behold, their station got hit by what I believe was actually strong straight line winds, kind of like what Jake and I would have experienced during the Temple storm. But I bring that up to say, also just kind of caveat here, I'm going to bring something else up. I'm kind of diverting here, mainly because I forgot to mention it earlier. But with that same station that got hit in Abilene, for those of you who don't know, our own First Alert meteorologist, Jillian Johnson, before she came here to work for us at KWTX, she was actually at KXTS in Abilene. And so if you ever follow her on Facebook, you may have come across this post. Thinking about everybody in the big country about the severe storms last night. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures to show with the damage, but it was pretty significant damage that practically happened right across or right on top of the weather center there at KXTS. So definitely thinking about all the people out there in Abilene from this past weekend. Lots of people that I know. Jillian, obviously. There's another meteorologist up in Oklahoma now who also used to work in Abilene at that KXTS. His name is Damon Lane. He works for KOC 05 in Oklahoma City now. He was also thinking about the people out there in Abilene. So definitely, those storms, they can definitely do a lot of damage. Thankfully, from the storm in Abilene, it doesn't sound like anybody was hurt, which is good. But yeah, definitely, it's definitely kind of shocking the first time you see those kinds of impacts. I remember the first time I saw any impacts was actually Andover, Kansas, 2022. So obviously Jake probably was not there for this. This was actually during my college days back at OU. But I was in Andover on April 29th, 2022 is when a giant EF3 tornado rolled through there. Thankfully, nobody was fatally injured or wounded from that storm. But I remember driving through Andover after it passed through, and I was like, man, this was some serious stuff. But and even the videos that came out afterwards too. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there's one particular viral video of a guy who was like sitting in his living room, and then the tornado was practically coming straight at his house. And it was one of those, and it wasn't like a huge tornado. It was kind of like a little drill bit tornado. So it was like a little pencil at the bottom, like digging into the dirt. And as it was doing that, you can see it pass by a shed, and the roof of the shed just whoosh, it was off immediately. And after the guy saw that through his living room window, he was like, nope, I'm taking shelter. And he ran inside. But yeah, so it was definitely some strong storms. They can definitely do a lot of damage. But yeah, Jake, bring it back to you. Sorry, that was a little bit of a...
It's okay.
we like to go different directions here on Weather Nerds from time to time. So going back to you, so aside from the Temple tornado, what would you say is maybe some of your more memorable chases? Obviously, I know you've been on a few more than that one.
Let's see. Obviously, I've been on quite a few with you. That one is definitely the top of the list in terms of how memorable it was. I don't think I've ever gotten that close to a tornado before,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And actually, I think it's kind of funny you mentioned Twisters earlier on. I think Twisters actually came out around the time that we chased that storm, and I remember seeing it with my wife and my mom, and you know, they were just saying, you know, is that what it's really like out there? And it's like, not in my experience, you know. And I thought the unrealistic part of that movie was they saw a tornado like every other scene, you know.
Yeah. No, that is probably an analogy I like to use when it comes to storm chasing is that storm chasing is a lot like fishing. You have to sit there for long periods of time, and during that long period of time, there's most likely absolutely nothing happening. And every once in a while, you'll get a little bit of a bite, and you can finally bring it reel it in.
Yeah.
So that kind of hits on the point you brought up earlier. Storm chasing is like an all-day ordeal, especially if you're one of those people who likes to storm chase and go across different states. First name that comes to mind is meteorologist Reed Timmer, which, if those of you don't know who he is, in a lot of people's opinions, kind of crazy sometimes for what he does. But essentially, he takes vehicles, turns them into tanks, and drives them into tornadoes and gets all kinds of crazy footage. And he even had his own TV show on the Discovery Channel at one point, which is actually one of the big reasons I got into meteorology. I watched that show a lot growing up. If that doesn't tell you anything about, you know, how I got here. But yeah, it's an all-day ordeal, especially if you go, like, I mean, you got to drive long distances. I think there was one day...
I think it's the most... I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think it was the most recent one that we did, and
Yep.
I was actually going to bring this up as well. It was... that one's memorable in its own way, not because we saw anything, but...
Yeah.
So we had a chase within the past 2 months or so. And we drove all over our viewing area, didn't really catch anything or see anything, but that was one of those that we didn't really stop, you know. Like some of these we stopped for a little bit and like kind of catch our breath, compose ourselves, and see where we're going next. But this one we drove the entire time. I think we stopped maybe once over an 8 or 9 hour span, because there were several different storms that were kind of facilitating, and they were not close to each other.
No, they were not.
But we finished up at the end of the day. I think we started around 11 o'clock in the morning, finished up probably around the end of the 6:30 newscast. We did the math on how far we had gone, and we could have made it from Waco to Kansas. I think, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's something like that in the amount of time that we drove. But instead, we made it from Waco to Waco.
Yeah, we round up right where we started.
Right where we started, yeah.
Yeah,
so.
I remember that day. I think the most eventful part of that day was probably when we, like, right at the start, we went up to Hillsboro, and there was a tornado warning that was rolling through there, and we just got to it in the nick of time. Thankfully, there wasn't a tornado, at least we don't think. But there were some pretty strong winds with that one. I remember we got up to the Buc-ee's there at the I-35 east-west split, and we got to the Buc-ee's, pulled over into the gas station, actually, that was across from Buc-ee's, I think. And once the storm passed, we got back. We pulled out of the parking lot. There was a large gust of wind, and I was like, nope, go back, because we weren't quite sure. Like, it was one of those days where... another thing that I remember about that day, no, I'm thinking of a different day. That was the day that I went out with Brad. Regardless, though, that day, though, we went all over. We started in Hill County up in Hillsboro, and then after that storm, we managed to make our way down south out to, where did we go? All the way down to, like, almost Cameron, I think. We went down to Kasi. That's where we were. We were in Kasi and made our way all the way out to Marquay, which is like the very western or eastern edge of our viewing area. So like we couldn't go any further than that. So yeah, it was definitely a very busy day. We saw a few funnels. I think there was one storm that I reported to the Weather Service that had a little bit of rotation with it, but nothing crazy. We saw some hail that day too. But it wasn't anything wild, thankfully. But yeah, the other day that I was going to mention too is sometimes it's hard to see things. Even if there is something there, it's hard to see things. And the one that I was about to bring up, there was a chase that I went on with our other photog, Brad Vaughn. He was driving that day. And the thing that I remember vividly about that day is how foggy it was. There was so much fog that day, especially down in the Temple area where we headed. And even though there was a confirmed tornado, we couldn't see anything. So it was one of those things where, like, all right, we got to be very careful now because this thing could be on top of us any second. And so yeah, that's another part of the danger of storm chasing. You really got to know what you're doing, especially if you find yourself in a situation where you're flying blind like that. So yeah, that's just a little bit about. I know we're going a little bit longer than we usually do today, which is not a bad thing. I love getting some time filler here, but. Yeah, so that's a little bit about Jake and I's chase experience. Obviously, Jake, you do other things outside of storm chasing. Is there anything that you would like to talk about? What is your favorite story that you've covered so far? Do you have one?
No doubt, and this is definitely coming from a little bit of a place of bias, because it was I mentioned I love shooting football. Like it's a lot of fun for me. So those definitely kind of have a special place for me. But most fun thing I think I've done since doing this job, and the game itself did not go the way that I would have liked it to have gone if I had drawn it up. But I got to cover A&M versus Texas this past November. Their first meeting in 13 years, and it was kind of an all-day affair for me that day because I wasn't just focused on shooting the highlights for the game, that is something that I did, but I also shot a story just of fan reactions and what it meant for that game to be returning to college football. And so I was there for game day in the morning. Then I talked to some fans on both sides and went to the game, and it was a crazy atmosphere. Wish it had gone a little differently, but maybe this year. But that one was definitely really cool. Another College Station related story. I got to go last year for H.W. Bush's 100th birthday, or what would have been his 100th birthday.
Yeah.
All of his kids and grandkids. He had this thing he would do where every 5 years, towards the end of his life, he would go skydiving. And so that's a way that his kids and grandkids kind of honor him now. So that was a pretty cool story that I got to work on as well. So
yeah, I've gotten to see you talk about those stories a little bit. Jake and I, every once in a while, we'll go do school visits and stuff like that. There was one in particular that we went to at Lorena Elementary. That one was a lot of fun. Yeah. But yeah, no, those are all really, really cool stories. And if you ever were considering about becoming a photojournalist or a journalist in general, those are the kinds of things you get to do. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And Central Texas is a cool place to start out. Also, it obviously it's a little bit of a in terms of how wide our viewing area is. You get to see a lot of different things. Obviously, there's Baylor right up the road, so there's some big time athletics if that's the kind of thing that you're into. But you get some cool experiences. Getting to do what I do and what you do. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, Jake, thank you so much for joining us here on Weather Nerds today. We really appreciate it. And for those of you watching on Facebook as well, thank you so much for joining. Before we go, do want to give just a quick little self-push here. That is, if I can find what I'm looking for, and I may have lost it. Give me just one moment. But for those of you who aren't aware, we're obviously live on Facebook here at Weather Nerds. You can also find us live, or not live, but you can find the pre-recorded episodes of Weather Nerds on our Degrees of Science YouTube channel. We're going to go ahead and use this one right here. This is a little screen recording that I have, so it's probably a little bit out of date, so take that in mind. But this is a look at the Degrees of Science YouTube channel here. You can see on the homepage, all of the videos of Degrees of Science, Weather Nerds, KWTX, Weather Extra. All of those episodes are there on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel. If you go to the videos tab, you can kind of see what's most recent, what isn't. You can also see some of the shorts that we've done, live streams that we've done there on Degrees of Science. But if you go over to that podcast tab right there, you can see all of the previous episodes of Weather Nerds all in one playlist. So if you haven't watched us before, feel free to check that out. This is still a relatively new thing that we're now on episode 14, which marks about 2 weeks straight of Weather Nerds, and you can see that that was a little screen recording that I did on my phone, so kind of had to improvise there. But we're happy to keep this whole Weather Nerds thing going, and we really appreciate everybody who views us. So feel free to, if you haven't been able to catch the live shows here on Facebook, definitely go check out the recording ones. Obviously, this one will also be uploaded to the Degrees of Science YouTube channel sometime this week as well. Likely by, if not today, it'll probably be up there tomorrow. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in on Facebook, Degrees of Science, wherever you're watching. Really appreciate it. Hope you all have a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next week for episode 15.